Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to the Village of Vernon Plan Commission meeting. It is Wednesday, December 14th, 2023. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance of a flag and a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Brad, would you mind doing the open meeting law compliance and roll call, please?
President Chu.
I'm here.
Commissioner Nowak is excused absent. Commissioner Rinaldi's not here. Commissioner Alex.
Present.
Trustee Millies. Here. This meeting was noticed and posted according to law.
Ladies and gentlemen, we do have a public hearing that is scheduled to start at 6, but we have one small plan commission item that we'd like to take up. It should be a real quick item, and then we'll do the public hearing notice. I mean, the CSM, I kind of want to do it all together so we don't violate the open meetings law. So Mr. Porter, would you like to come forward? And Mr. Porter, what Sean Malarkey, our planning and zoning administrator, is going to do is give a overview of the brief little change you'd like to make, and then if there's anything you'd like to add that Sean missed, please let us know. Sean?
Thank you. If you recall, the Plan Commission and the board approved the CSM for Porterville, essentially taking the property that they have, creating a 5-acre parcel from 2 of their larger parcels, and then also expanding the smaller 4.6-acre parcel into a 1-acre parcel. So it was approved. There's a couple of little technical issues that are still being cleaned up, but once those are done, the village can sign and record it. But what the petitioners are asking for is just basically an amendment to the approval that happened. They want to just move a couple of lot lines around. So here was the smaller 1-acre parcel that was going to be created. Here's the existing boundary, and so it's expanded to the north and the west. And they'd like to move the lot lines a little bit to the east. I think was it 15 feet increase? Is that what the?
Yes, 15. Right now, there's approximately 5 feet.
5 feet between the garage and the lot line.
And the lot line. If we move the lot lines to the east, the building that is to the east will be approximately 20 feet from that lot.
Yeah, so if you see what was supplied, it looks like it's much closer. It's not perfectly drawn. There's almost 60 feet between this building and these buildings. So if this gets moved an additional 15, there's basically 20, and then there's like 35 plus feet to that. So it doesn't impact setbacks or anything else. But what it would do is it would decrease the size of the larger 5-acre parcel, and it was important to keep that at 5 acres to coincide with the 1 unit per 5-acre density. So as part of this, if the Plan Commission chooses to recommend approval of this adjustment to the boundaries, the larger lot would have to be slightly modified to make sure that there remains 5 acres on that property.
That 5-acre lot, is that actually 5.2 acres?
It's 5.02 acres. So there's a little bit over. So, if you're moving it 15 feet over, it looks like the distance is 15 times 209 feet. You have to increase the bigger lot by about 3,000 square feet in order to make sure it stays at 5 acres. And that probably could happen here at this, this little triangle might be able to be adjusted somehow, or the back might be able to be moved back just slightly to get that 3,000 feet. That back lot line, in essence, if it was moved just a foot or two back, you're gonna be able to get that 3,000 in there. So I don't have any issues with it. I didn't write a staff report because of simplicity. We didn't want to spend any additional money doing so. So that's all I have.
Does the Plan Commission I'm sorry, Mr. Porter, did Mr. Malarkey cover your issue completely? Is there anything you wanted to add? Okay. I mean, it is. Absolutely. I know Mr. Porter called like 2 days after and said, is there any way I can move it? And I mean, I didn't have any problem with it, but of course, we can't do that either. So that's why it's before you. So is there any questions in regards to Mr. Porter's request from the Plan Commission? Hearing none, is there a motion, or would you like me to make a motion?
I can make approve the 15-foot
Recommend approval to the village board.
and also and providing the 5-acre lot stays at 5 acres.
Okay, did you get that, Brad? It's moving it, you said 15 feet to the east and with that modification that the larger parcel remains at a 5-acre.
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Mr. Porter. Mr. Porter, we're going to put this on the board's agenda tomorrow. If you want to come, you're more than welcome to come, but you have 2 board members here, so if you want to come tomorrow, you can.
Okay, just that it's gonna go on the agenda tomorrow.
Yes, because the board has to concur. The Plan Commission makes a recommendation, and then the village board, actually approves or denies
Okay, so the meeting tomorrow is again at 6.
at 6. All right? Thanks, Mr. Porter.
Thank you for the board's indulgence.
Take care.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda item, John and Paul, did you want to come forward? Trylar, I know, John, you're going to do all the talking. Mr. Trylar, did you want to come forward also? Should we put a chair up there for you? I know, Paul, you're going to do all the talking, right? You can just sit here. Okay. And he can hit you if you say something wrong. On the agenda first for the Trylars, we have a certified survey map for John Trylar for the property located at South 79 West 25925 National Avenue, VNT number 2078-997 and VNT 2078996. What's going to happen, Mr. Paul, your last name is Trylar also, correct? Okay. What Sean's going to do is he's going to explain to the audience and to the Plan Commission, which I know they've studied, your certified survey map request, and then we'll get through that, and then we'll just do the little public hearing notice on some of your waiver modifications. Is that okay? That's right. Sean, you want to take it away?
Sure. The properties are on the overhead. You can see on National Avenue, just south of Morningstar. Here are the 2 properties here. It's 22 and 26 acres. What they want to do, essentially the properties do have some wetlands, environmental features in the back. What they'd like to do is just consolidate the existing home and the 4 accessory buildings that are out there onto a smaller 5-acre parcel to consolidate that into 5 acres, and then they would be remaining with a 43-acre lot for the rest. So let me pull up the certified survey map. Here are the 2 properties basically combined. Lot 2 is 43 acres. Lot 1 would be 5 acres. The zoning is rural residential, RRD5, which does allow 1 unit per 5 acres, similar to the Porterville CSM we just discussed. So they'd be essentially doing something very similar, creating a lot that's 5 acres in size, and then leaving the rest for some further development. There is a conceptual plan that was developed for the remainder of the property that I assisted the petitioners with. I think it was a couple years ago now. The configuration of the CSM is slightly different. Lot 1 isn't quite shaped exactly the same, but it's fairly close. That would allow some development of Lot 2. In essence, it would be ultimately could be developed very similar to what the development just east of their property on Prairie Side Drive was done. This was all part at one time of the same CSM. This larger lot and their 2 lots were 3 lots of the same CSM, all zoned RRD5, and the property to the east was developed according to RRD5. The conceptual master plan, just very quickly, shows the 5-acre lot, which is not quite exactly the same shape and size, but in essence roughly the same. There's an option for a road to come in, and then a number of lots that could be developed with some stormwater. And at the time when we were originally talking about it, we talked about an initial lot, a very small cul-de-sac that could be extended. Again, there's no plans at this time for development. I'm assuming it could be developed or it could be sold to another developer, but the point was to prove that it could be developed in some way. Splitting this lot off wouldn't cause any problems with further development of the site. I would say, I think this property I think was used for horses in some capacity. There's some pasture area. The rest is kind of ag. I would say now, because it's 5 acres, I want to make sure that you're aware that when it's reduced in size, the number of animal units are limited. And so you get 1 horse for the first 3 acres and then 1 for each additional acre beyond that. So the most this could support would be 3 total on the property, current or future buyer, whoever it might be. Any building that has livestock has to be at least 50 feet from the property lines, which is no problem here for this property. So it meets all those things. Consistent with the comp plan, consistent with the zoning. The only thing for consideration here is a couple of waivers. One, they're requesting a waiver for delineation of the wetlands in the back of the property because they're really just interested in this 1 lot for now. Whenever this gets developed, we'd certainly require delineation of the wetlands at that time. This is a pretty standard waiver that we look at from the land division ordinance. This particular waiver from the land division ordinance isn't the one that requires the public hearing. It's the waiver from the accessory building. So that's the other waiver that's required. In essence, for residential properties, you're allowed 2 accessory buildings, total footprint not to exceed 3% of the lot area. There's going to be 4 accessory buildings out there, totaling 80 square feet. A 5-acre lot is normally allowed 35. So it's roughly 350 square feet above the limit, which isn't it's not a ton, but there are more buildings out there. But again, this is a consolidation. So that needs a waiver for both the number of accessory buildings and then total footprint. Our surveyor had a few technical comments, nothing that is worth discussing tonight. So that's all I have.
Like to do is, if you have any questions in regards to the certified survey map, or I'm sorry, Mr. Trilar, did you want to add anything to what Sean said about this certified survey map at this point?
The only thing I was going to mention is the person that is buying it is the person that lives on that cul-de-sac. He's just adding it to his land. He's not buying it to develop it at this time.
You mean lot 2?
Yes.
So he's going to add lot 2 to his property.
He lives at right where that point is at the very end, because he owns the rest of the conservancy.
Oh, I see. So he'll own both these properties.
So he's just purchasing that to add to his, and he calls it off of it at this time.
Okay.
That
Thank you,
makes
Mr.
sense.
Trilar. Plan Commission members, do you have any questions in regards to the certified survey map? Because if you don't, then I just want to read the public hearing notice, and then we can discuss the certified survey map and the possible waivers that the Plan Commission would have to look at. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read that notice is hereby given that the Plan Commission by the Village of Vernon meeting will be held on Wednesday, June 14th, 2023 at 6 p.m. at the Vernon Village Hall, located at West 249 South 8910 Center Drive, to consider a request for the property owned by the Trilar Family Trust, applicant Paul Trilar, for the property located at South 79 West 25925 National Avenue in the Village of Vernon, tax key number 2078996, to request a waiver under section 300-14 paren A paren 7 of the Village Code, specifically for the building quantity and size per section 300-14 paren A paren 5 for existing accessory structure buildings related to land division by a certified survey map request. So what I'd like to do, Sean, you did explain in your narrative the reason for those 2 waiver modifications. Plan Commission, before we go through, the individual criteria for your consideration, is there any questions in regards to those 2 waivers that the Trilars are requesting at this point? No questions?
What was the size of the second lot overall then?
43 acres.
Okay. So if there's no questions at this point, what I'd like to do before we go through the criteria, is there anybody in the public that wanted to make a statement or ask any questions in regards to the Trilar's request for these waivers? Or, so I just wanted to note for record that there were no comments. So what I'd like to do with the Plan Commission members, do you feel, would you like to take these individually, or do you want me to alternate on the waiver provisions, or what is is your pleasure?
Whatever's quickest.
Okay, so the quickest way, first, what I'm going to do is going to ask the first question in regards, or is that hard to do? Should I just keep it from one waiver portion, or can I do one simultaneously, that they answer the question to both? Is it cleaner for you just for me to do the, okay, so what we're going to do. Yeah, okay. So what we'll do, if you don't mind, Plan Commission members, I think the easiest one is the waiver for the wetland delineation. So, and I just so I know the Plan Commission knows, we've done this on these type of parcels. They're so big and it's such a, we typically always approve it, but my question to the Plan Commission at this point would, do you feel this request or modification, if it would be granted, would adversely affect property owners in the surrounding areas?
No.
Okay, oops, I missed one. Would you feel this request or modification, if granted, would be consistent with the general intent of the Village of Vernon zoning chapter?
Yes.
Would you feel this request or modification, if it would be granted, would benefit the petitioner of this project in a way that is not inconsistent with the village's interest? That's a no. And then, would you feel that whether the petitioner is in full compliance with all applicable ordinances and agreements in the village?
Yes.
And would you feel that this waiver or modification, the chapter itself should be changed to accommodate this type of situation presented by the petitioner? No. Okay, so Brad, you've noticed. So Sean, I'll just note for the record that we all agree unanimously that should be granted.
Yeah, and just the only comment that I want to make is that the CSM needs to be updated. And there'll be changes here based on our technical comments anyways, but noting that waiver was granted. So that's in my staff report. Just make sure your surveyor sees that.
Okay, that it was granted.
That it was granted, there needs to be a note added to the CSM that the waiver was granted for that's so that the wetlands didn't have to be delineated.
Okay, so,
But again, it's in the report.
Okay, Plan Commission members, now we're going to discuss the accessory building structures pertinent to Section 314(a)(5). So my question to the Plan Commission is, do you feel this waiver or modification, if granted, would be consistent with the general intent of this chapter?
Yes.
Okay, and I agree too. The waiver or modification would adversely affect surrounding property owners?
No.
I agree. Do you feel that the waiver modification would benefit the petitioner's project in a way that is not inconsistent with the village's interest?
No.
No. Would you feel this waiver modification is in full compliance with the applicable ordinances and agreements with the village?
Yes.
And then lastly, do you feel this waiver or modification that the chapter itself should be changed to accommodate this type of situation presented by the petitioner? No.
No.
So, Brad and Sean, you can note for the record that we unanimously approve the accessory building structures. So, at this point, Plan Commission, do you feel comfortable making a motion, a recommendation to the village board on the Trilar certified survey maps with the conditions that we all agreed upon for the waivers? Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
And consistent with the planner's
Comment.
comments, Mike? Okay.
Correct.
And then, Jeff, you don't have any problem adding? Okay. And is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. So, Mr. and Mr. Trilar, what's going to happen is this is going to go to the village board tomorrow night because the Plan Commission makes a recommendation. So if you want to come to the meeting tomorrow night, it's at 6 o'clock, and we have all the Plan Commission items right in the very beginning of the agenda.
sounds good, we'll be here.
Okay?
Thank you so
And then Sean or Brad will send you all the updated, did you get planner comments?
We didn't make any changes tonight, so you have the final version of the comments, the staff report. You sent these out, right?
Do you have these, Paul or John?
I'll email it to you.
You don't? Okay, they didn't have them.
Email it to you. Or we'll email it to you or I'll call you tomorrow.
Yeah, because you're gonna want to give the,
Stop it.
Just stop it, I'll have one printed for you right away.
Okay.
you could take mine. Should I give him mine? That way you can you want to give that to your surveyor? And don't look at how I phonetically pronounced your name. Is that okay?
He can go ahead and put the final markers or
After the board approves it, assuming they approve it, then there's a couple final technical changes, and then it's done.
Oh, my God. I can't get my... Here, Paul, you want to take this? Thanks, Paul. Boy, John, you worked on this a long time. You too, Paul. So like I said, if you want to come to the board meeting, you're more than welcome, kids.
Okay, thank you.
Sound good?
Thank you to you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Plan Commission, the next agenda, Robert Studer, Mr. and Mrs. Studer, are you here? Yes. Oh, Paul, can you leave that up there? Mr. and Mrs. Studer, you want to come forward? If you don't mind, kids? You got to give John a little time. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Studer, welcome. Mr. and Mrs. Studer, what is going to happen, again, is Sean is going to explain exactly what you're proposing to the Plan Commission. And then what I'd like to do is have, if there's anything you feel that he's missed, if you could let the Plan Commission, know, we'll call on you then, but listen very carefully to what he says. Sound good? Thanks. Sean, take it away.
Thank you, Karen. Brad, would you mind flipping back? So this property is in the north side of Skyline Avenue. It is a 9.97 acre property, just a little ways west of 164. The Studers have an existing accessory building near the back of the property, and sort of a secluded area. It's north of this isolated natural resource area. There's tree line on the west side. There's tree line on the north side. There isn't on the east, on the direct adjacent property, but a little bit over there is. So in reality, this, the existing accessory building is very well hidden. That existing building is 54 feet by 98 feet, which measures 5,292 square feet. What they like to do is build an identical or very, very similar accessory building just to the north of that. And I'll share with you in essence, this is turned sideways. Let me rotate that.
I know, Plan Commission, you have these pictures, but I like Sean to show the public, if they're watching, what's being proposed. Look at the Studer's face.
Yeah, so there's essentially a very similar building just north of that, and what they're proposing meets all the requirements of the zoning ordinance. They have a big enough lot that allows them to do this. They're entitled to get 2 of these buildings out there, but anything above 3,000 square feet requires Plan Commission approval, not board approval, but just Plan Commission approval. The first one was approved in 2002 at a time when the zoning ordinance only allowed 1% of the lot area to be used for accessory buildings, so they got that one. Current ordinance allows up to 3% to be used for accessory buildings, so they are underneath that, but it has to be approved by the Plan Commission. And so the section on this in the ordinance for the Plan Commission essentially states that you need to consider whether or not it would adversely affect property owners in the surrounding area and any other facts that may be relevant to the application. Upon consideration of these factors, but without necessarily making affirmative findings thereon, the Plan Commission should determine whether the building is objectively reasonable. I would also mention there's a deed restriction on the property that got put on when the first accessory building was there that essentially said it couldn't be used for commercial purposes, and then had to be torn down if the lot was ever subdivided. So we would have a new deed restriction put on that includes this new building in the same capacity, essentially, that it's prohibited from commercial industrial purposes, and then it also would need to be torn down if the lot was ever divided. It's my understanding that the petitioners intend to use the building for personal storage. They can elaborate on that if they want to. I was originally not concerned, but I pointed out in my staff report about stormwater management because there's such impervious area. We recently, in the last couple of days, got word from Waukesha County, who handles stormwater management review, that they're providing a technical exemption from stormwater management for this project because looking carefully at the surroundings and topography, et cetera, that they have found that no adverse offsite impacts will occur. So even though water will run off of this, the site itself will just be able to mitigate stormwater, so it's not going to impact neighboring properties.
Was your letter from Marissa, Sean?
It is from Marissa,
Yeah.
yeah. So, again, if you choose to approve this, the staff report does have a list of our standard conditions for these types of things.
Mr. and Mrs. Studer, is there anything you'd like to add to Sean's comments in regards to your petition, your request? Plan Commission members? Any questions in regards to the Studer's application, the building, the setbacks?
You have to put a driveway going back there to them or anything? I didn't see really an access.
There is one, it's hard to see, but it's in the trees back here
Oh,
on the
okay.
west side of the property. So it is hard to see.
My only question is probably for Sean, the tear down requirement, I saw that in there from the old one. Can you elaborate on what that means? Main reason being, if there were any change to the lot lines, would that then trigger raising of the building?
I think the point was is that if it gets below the size that's allowable for that size of accessory building, then that would trigger the tear down. At the time, it was 1%. Right now,
Yeah.
it's 3%. So, it basically prohibited land divisions. It didn't prohibit necessarily moving lot lines. So, if a lot line adjustment came forward to the Plan Commission, which does need to be approved by the Plan Commission, I think we just do the calculation and make sure that there's enough lot size.
And does it revert to what it was at the time of it being allowed? So let's say they were at 1%, then now Plan Commission or the code says 3%. If it goes back to 1%, does it go to the time of it being passed or the time that it's being applied for? I would assume applied for. But.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think maybe we should clarify the condition to state something to the effect that it needs to be torn down or removed if it should, if it exceeds the threshold of lot size, basically. So if the lot's reduced as such that would no longer allow, then it has to be removed.
Would that be in the deed restriction, Sean?
Yes, as part of the deed restriction. So I'm saying condition 6, it says it may not be used for commercial industrial purposes, which is fine, and that any future land division requires removal. I would say that any reduction in lot size that no longer allows the building footprint according to zoning restrictions would
Yeah, I think it
require-
has to work in
require
there,
removal.
the ratio, that 3%
Right,
type of ratio.
The 3%. But I don't want to use 3% because the code could change. So we just want to make sure that, if it's reduced below whatever's allowed at the time.
At the time, yeah. And that was my main question to, just make everybody aware. If it does change at a future time, it's kind of locked in right now, but that doesn't mean in the future when that type of language is added in there.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Further discussion from the Plan Commission? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval or denial? And if there is approval with the conditions as presented by the planner with the modification to item number 6 in regards to any reduction in the size of the lot? Is there a motion to that effect or of approval or denial?
I'll make that motion for approval
With a modification
with the
to-
modifications as stated, including item number 6.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Mr. and Mrs. Studer, thank you so much for working so well with Marissa. She was really, really impressed on how hard you worked with her, and you got good kudos from Stormwater Management. All right, thank you, guys. Now you get to work with Vince. He's really crabby. No, I'm kidding. Okay, guys, are we at wetlands?
Comprehensive plan of wetlands, which one is it?
Yeah, it's wetlands. Vince, you want to come forward? So I know, Sean, Vince, we want to get you in and out because you got a lot on your plate right now. So I don't know who wants to take the lead, but
I told him he didn't have to come tonight. I said I would handle it, but thanks for coming.
so Vinny,
You might as well introduce it since you brought it to the board.
So basically, every year, Sean and I get together and go over some of our code sections as far as our zoning is concerned. we kind of take a look at different, offset setbacks and problems that we're having and we talked about this for a while, more in depth lately. As you know, when we came out of county, we had to abide by the wetland setback of 75 feet. Typically, when you're a village, that's reduced, we can reduce that. I think it's 10 and, those in the corner, if I'm not mistaken, it's 10 foot separation.
Muskego?
10 mosquitoes is
10 or 15 in Muskego. Yeah.
Right, so we were just looking at, we had some problematic areas with, it seems like every year when we do our different mapping for the county, you know, they're doing aerials and they're increasing a lot of the, particularly on like long view road, I mean, what's the point where you can't do anything back there? Chateau, Cameron Drive, Cedar Court, there's some stuff on the town line where it's really problematic. So I had suggested, and Sean kind of in agreement with you, take a look at that and bring it to the plan commission. We brought it to staff, and then the recommendation to bring it to the plan commission to see if they would address maybe a modification to that.
And Mike, I think you, when we were looking at the last round of rezoning or changes to amendments to the zoning ordinance, you mentioned wetlands as one of the things
Yeah.
to look at as well as part of your list. So I'm in agreement. I think 75 feet is, it's an easy number to throw out there. It's the county's number. There's a lot of towns. Village of Waukesha still has that same number. But yeah, it's pretty cumbersome and doesn't really allow a lot of wiggle room. And so we were hoping to bring maybe some examples. I mean, Vince threw a couple numbers out there, but we were hoping to bring some examples of how other communities look at it to provide more flexibility for wetland setbacks. We certainly are going to look to protect the wetlands. We're not looking for runoff directly in the wetlands. And so whatever reduction happened would be cognizant of protecting.
We want to be able to, if you're going to reduce it, have a area where we could easily grade around that building without causing.
Mitigate direct runoff into the wetlands, yeah. So so we're not making any decisions tonight. We're just asking for authorization. The board obviously heard this at staff and
Right.
asked to bring it to the planning commission. We're just looking for your blessing to bring some examples back and
We
talk
have
about some
mine.
changes.
Yeah, mine.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things to consider is what's allowed in the wetlands as far as improvements. I mean, the current code, I think you can't even have like an improved walking path versus, you know, someone thinks, well, I can't build in the wetlands, you can't build your house. Well, what about your patio or your deck or those types of things to have a graduated, you know, it might be something where certain parts of the setbacks are different for different structures or just improvements.
Right.
The other thing would be seeing the different grade of wetlands. Like you said, they're always increasing what a wetland is. Now you're putting in stormwater retention ponds that are creating new wetlands. You're having drainage ditches that are being called out because a wetland delineator is saying those are the markers of a wetland. And they say, well, it's gray area and nobody ever really calls you on it, but it's one of those technicalities where we're creating wetlands in a lot of spaces. And
We are, and as a zoning administrator and a building inspector, we can't, we have to, we have to honor that 75 feet right now from even a drainage. So
yeah, and that becomes difficult.
in certain areas, it is really restricted.
But if the number was reduced far enough, and I don't know what it will be, then maybe it's a moot point for decks, patios, or houses if it's small enough reduction. But I don't know what the number is. We're going to bring back a few examples and
Yeah, that would be nice.
talk about it.
And to address Mike's issue too, if we could look at some hybrids or, you know, whatever you can give us some options.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I definitely think, even when I know we were kind of doing that fast.
And if the plan commission wants to present or look at some options too, I mean,
Yeah.
we're certainly open for,
Yeah, Mike, if you've
No.
got a good one too.
not saying you have to, but if you want to, bring it to the table.
Or Jeff. Sorry.
I only said Mike because Mike raised the issue as before he was on the plan commission when we were going through the zoning ordinance changes.
I always have a problem. What's a wetland one year, the next year it's dry. It's like, how do you call this a wetland? You know,
Yeah.
goes back and forth. The line's always moving and
Well, then you can do wetland delineation too, but wetland delineation takes 6 to 10 months, costs about $4 or $5.
Yeah, it's expensive.
You really want to but this is
Right.
gonna give, more use of the property.
Well, and the other thing is we run into the situations where we have a 40-acre parcel where, we're repeatedly having to give waivers, and that's the only way to do it. But if they're looking to put that detached structure in there, we're worrying about 50 feet from the lot line. We're not worrying about 5 acres down the way, just so everything is consistent that way to say, yeah, we're protecting the wetlands, but we're not making it so that people can't develop their property and, make smart changes.
Vince or Sean, have you ever seen in a zoning code where greenhouses are built and they build them in the wetlands only because, I mean, they're not permanent structures. It's a greenhouse and they're typically wet because they're growing. Have you ever seen?
I'm not familiar with that. Vince, have you seen
Have you?
I'm familiar with the thing that happened in
I know it happened in Vernon.
that? Are you talking about you talking about Edgewood?
Yeah. I mean, at one point, well, I know one was really in there, but, I mean, to me, but our setbacks were 75 feet at the time, too.
use that as a building, even though the way it was built, it could have water runoff through it.
Right.
It's kind of a really gray area at that time. It still is.
Yeah.
Right. The DNR also has standards for these, so we got to make sure whatever we do doesn't supersede what their minimums are.
So you think you guys would be ready by next meeting with some
Vince,
ideas?
I mean, sure, we can come up with some examples. We're not going to write anything. We'll probably just compile a few things and discuss
Right.
them. Vince, if you have a couple to send my way, I'll find a couple, and then we'll try to get a happy
And
medium.
Mike, if you got anything, or Jeff, that you want to get to Sean or Vince, does that sound good?
Yeah, you don't have to. You certainly don't have to.
All right, Vinny, you're excused. Thank you,
Thanks for coming
Vince.
in.
All righty, gentlemen, we're going to jump right into the comprehensive land use plan. Sean, thank you so much for all the hard work you did on this. Brings back memories. So, Sean, I'll just let you take it from here and,
Yeah, if you remember, we started looking at the Lang property, which was on Cartwright. And Big Ben, he came in looking for a land division, couldn't do a land division because the comp plan didn't allow it, the zoning didn't allow a change, and he petitioned that, and the Plan Commission felt that, well, let's look at the bigger area and take a wider look. And so that's what I did. I looked at the land divisions in the area, the lot size, the development pattern, the history of the CSMs, and whether or not there's any restrictions to development on there. We did. If you look on the overhead, this is kind of like the CSMs I examined, but the property directly north of this was changed previously. So this orange area all used to be this yellow, which is rural residential. It's a 5-acre density. Now it's higher to suburban density residential. That's as far as we went when we looked at this back in 2019 as a buffer from the village of Big Bend. And so now we're moving south here. We're looking a bit south, and that's what I did. So this color map kind of takes a look at the history of the CSMs in the area. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here because I trust you. You read the staff report, but I'll just mention the first one that occurred in the area was this red one, CSM 5866, created this 7.45 acre lot. It's got an existing home, some accessory buildings. This one does have some potential to be further redivided depending on access from 164, or access from Cartwright Court, but that one's got possible land division potential. Nothing in the CSM prevents it. The next one that happened was the light blue area, which is essentially all of this. There's an outlot across Big Bend. That got divided. You can see the Preventure property here is it's pretty well developed, even though there's some property in the back that isn't. However, it's fairly landlocked in terms of a development pattern. And I don't see this subdividing without further roads coming through here. And there's no real good way to do it. So I don't think that one's a candidate for redivision. So these lots got redivided again in 2002. What you see here, that's when the Lang property got created at the time. That's when Cartwright Court Cartwright Court came in 2008. So this series of properties was divided 3 different times. The last division of these properties essentially prohibited any further division of everything south of Cartwright Court. These properties couldn't be redivided because there's two homes on it, and there's a landscaping business here on the Cartwright property that does not allow further division. So if and when that use ever stops and they want to do something else, we could consider a comp plan change at that time, but right now, it doesn't make any sense. These orange properties here were divided in 1999, basically 3 parcels. They're all under current ownership. There's isolated natural resource area and basically a private drive that comes all the way back to their property. There is some open land at the back of the property, but that's really not accessible except from City of Muskego. And because of the shape of these properties and configuration and the extent of the isolated natural resource area and the density that's limited there, I don't see these as candidates for further redivision either. These yellow properties were divided in 2009. These are the last ones that got divided in the area. Again, a lot of isolated natural resource area. There's already a house on this at 1 unit per 5 acres. There's another house on the back property, again, that only has access through a private drive through the City of Muskego. There's no actual road that goes back there. So again, this one I don't see as a candidate for redivision either. So it's pretty limited. The last page of the document essentially looks at the properties that I thought should be changed from rural residential to suburban density residential. Some of these are just recognizing the fact that the lots are already small enough at a density that makes sense for suburban density residential. This is the Lang property. These are already divided, and this is that one 7.4 acre property that might have another couple of splits. So it's essentially very limited in terms of what I'm recommending for change of the comp plan. And it looks like what I first envisioned is I thought there would be a continuous pattern that we just bring the suburban density residential down and encompass kind of everything in its way. But because it doesn't really make sense, I'm not advocating for that. Someone might look at this and call it spot planning or spot zoning if it gets rezoned, but I would argue that it's not simply because I analyze the properties, and there's no reason or rationale to further divide those at this time. The last thing I looked at was across the street in this area. This property is owned by Waukesha County as part of Greater Holdings. It's currently planned for residential, but it's really the access to the park here owned by the county. So I'm recommending at the same time we change the plan from rural residential to recreational for that property as well. There were a couple of other small parcels that I looked at as part of this that were not developed as part of subdivisions, but were developed as part of meets and bounds descriptions in the past. And so there's no real possibility to further divide any of those properties. In essence, the stuff on the west side of 164 is all environmental corridor. I'm saying basically change that little bit to suburban density to recognize those small lots, but there's no development potential there anyhow. So that's all I have. Essentially, this would require a Class 1 30-day notice, which means we couldn't hold the meeting next month. It would have to be the month after that to get proper noticing. If after the comprehensive plan would be changed, any petitioner, including the Langs, could come forward and request a rezoning if they have enough area to redivide.
So the Plan Commission, if they concur with your analysis, Sean could make a recommendation to the village board to hold a public hearing in August?
Yeah, and it would be probably a joint public hearing.
Right.
The way we usually do it would be an August meeting, give Brad enough time to notice the 30-day notice. And it would be up to the village as to whether or not you wanted to notify these individual property owners. Might be a good idea. If we let's say we change the comp plan, we do a blanket change to the comp plan. Like we did for in 2019, we did not notice every property owner.
That's correct.
But this is targeted enough that you could consider doing it.
We did do an open house, but it was a lot more.
We did do an open house,
There was
right.
many more properties.
Yeah, this is a much more targeted. So I think it probably makes sense to send notification to these, even if it's not required.
Right. Just as a courtesy. It's not that many property owners.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the properties I ultimately picked and the ones I left out? Is there any sense of maybe I didn't consider something or?
Seems to make sense.
I think it's good, Sean.
Okay.
What do you think, Brad?
I think it's good. I think there's a lot of challenges down there.
Right.
Right.
I'll just check, Sean. I know the county was talking about purchasing one of those small lots along the river
To the north, let me look at
there.
the,
Where you were talking that, and I don't know if the sale's gone through yet, but I'll just.
if you could verify, I had not heard of that. So if they are going to purchase one of those properties, but I think most of those properties, if you look at the plan, are already planned for, they're already in an environmental corridor, so. Yeah, then we can include that as a potential change for the public hearing.
Right. Sound good, gentlemen? Any questions? Sean, you did good work. Very good work.
Thank you very much. And so I guess we'll bring it back if the board concurs.
Yeah, it's on the board agenda tomorrow night, so we'll know. Is there, do you need a formal motion from the Plan Commission?
I don't know.
My recommendation probably should just because we are kind of initiating that comprehensive plan process.
Right. So at this point, I'd entertain a motion from the Plan Commission to recommend it to the village board to do a comprehensive land use plan via the information that was provided to the Plan Commission and eventually the village board for their consideration with the possibility of doing the public hearing in August.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Once again, Sean, thank you again. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Let's see, are we on minutes?
We're on President's report.
We're, you know what, we're not gonna say a lot because the board's gonna talk about that in closed session, so, Brad's gonna give you more of a report next, the next plan meeting, well, more that we could give to the Plan Commission, don't you think, Brad?
Yep, that's fair. Summary of what's going on.
Alrighty, so, minutes, is there, I have just a couple little tiny things, you know, little tiny changes grammatical, but is there a motion to approve the minutes? Or is there any changes you'd like to see? These are May 10th, right, Brad?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from May 10th.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion? Like I said, I'll give they're very tiny little grammatical, no big deal, so. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, any discussion on the motion? I'd like to discuss it. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Gentlemen, we are adjourned.